tariffs caused a sharp fall in the afternoon. That would be $200 billion in tariffs. The Nasdaq and the S&P, meantime, also came off their record highs. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister says a deal to rewrite the NAFTA trade agreement could be reached by the end of the week. And in fact, I'm still looking at my phone. Within hours, they're hoping to have some kind of a deal. The country's economy is also growing faster than expected, driven higher by an increase in exports. Now, Canada's latest figures say GDP grew at an annual rate of 2.9%. That's lower, of course, in the United States. They reported 4.2% earlier this week. Now, both economies, though, are growing more quickly than most of their G7 allies, and that includes the UK, Germany, and France. As you were saying, Canada remains adamant that it will only agree to a deal that is mutually beneficial. Former Canadian Deputy Prime Minister John Manley told me it would be really optimistic for a deal to be reached tomorrow. Take a listen.
Well, I keep hearing that things look good, but then good is kind of in the eye of the beholder. We know that the bilateral agreement between Mexico and the United States contained relatively few details. We haven't seen a text. We have essentially summaries. And if you want to be really optimistic, you'll think that tonight or tomorrow that there will be an agreement in principle that can be disclosed with some amount of information, but certainly not detailed information.
You know, some people have speculated that, look, given Mr. Trump's negotiating tactics, that perhaps they've worked and that Canada is negotiating right now to a gun to its head. Do you see it that way?
Well, I think they do have the ability to step aside if they wish. They've created the political basis for that. Of course, in Canada, it's always, there are two big rules. One is you shouldn't get too far from the United States, but the other is you shouldn't get too close to the United States. So Mr. Trudeau, in managing this, has to be able to present to Canadians that he got a good deal for Canada, that he stood up for Canada, and that he wasn't steamrollered. And I think Canadians would support him if he announced that he didn't have a deal and he had to walk away.
That's a Canadian perspective. A lot has been made about the kind of leverage that really Canada should have had with Congress, especially when it came to those key northern states. A lot of them also happen to be swing states. Did you see them as business friendly towards Canada? I mean, I know you speak to a lot of your American counterparts.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, we haven't played the Congress card yet. We're trying to deal with the administration on this. But if Mr. Trump were to go to Congress with a bilateral Mexican deal without Canada, he might just face some trouble in Congress. First of all, they didn't give him authority to negotiate a bilateral deal with Mexico. And secondly, many of those congressmen and senators from border states on the north would recognize that this is not good for them, and they would stand in the way of it. So I think that card has not yet been played.
John, I've known you a long time. I know you're not a betting man, but if you had to put any odds on this deal right now, I mean, let us know. In terms of, all I hear is optimism, something that, frankly, we have not heard in months about this deal.
Well, again, I'd say it's a question of optimism in the eye of the beholder. For Canada, will it be better than what we had? No. I mean, this is a Make America Great Again, America First deal. And the president seems to have the view that you can only have one winner in any trade negotiation. So I think that we have to recognize that we'll be giving some things up and we'll be getting very little for them. Is it still important to have a North American free trade area? Yes. And will we benefit from that? Absolutely. I think that the tricky decision for the Canadian government is it so bad that we should walk away, or is it good enough that we can say, let's get some certainty, close the door, and move on?
The Oval Office, Donald Trump and the people around him will be really happy to hear what you're saying, John, because it sounds like, look, their negotiating tactics have worked.
Well, they've worked because we're good players. We're the smaller economy. We need a deal. But I think if they think that they can force us to do things that are manifestly against Canadian interest, or that go too far, or deprive us, for example, of dispute resolution, that they will be disappointed.
Now, that dispute resolution, having a referee for these trade disputes, is one major issue. Another sticking point for negotiations, though, is agriculture. This week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau accused the U.S. of trying to dismantle controls on U.S. dairy entering Canada. President Trump blames high tariffs for hurting U.S. farmers and American agriculture. CNN's Gary Tuckman visited a U.S. dairy farm to try and find out if producers believe Mr. Trump can save their business.
It's milking time for about 350 cows here in the Wisconsin Dells. At a dairy farm that has been in the same family for generations, the Nelson family. Donald Nelson is 87.
For 70 years, I've been farming since I got out of high school. This is really the toughest year that we've ever had, and I've ever had in that 70 years. It's just as bad as the Depression of the 30s.
He's not the only one who feels that way. And President Trump blames Canada, blasting that country and its prime minister for high dairy tariffs, which he says are hurting U.S. farmers and killing U.S. agriculture. Nels Nelson and Sarah Lloyd are Donald Nelson's son and daughter-in-law.
When you heard Mr. Trump bash Canada so much for the problems of dairy farmers like you, what was your initial reaction?
I said, oh, come on, that's not the problem.
How long has this farm been in your family?
My grandfather bought this farm in 1889. Oh, yeah.
Jim Goodman and his wife Rebecca in Juneau County, Wisconsin, don't blame Canada either. They say there's a very simple reason they're getting about 40% less for their dairy than just a few years ago.
So why is that?
Too much milk.
And America's dairy farmers and their cows keep producing even more. Some say they're doing too good of a job, creating an oversupply that is dramatically driving down prices. Another issue? Canada has instituted supply management, a quota on what dairy farmers can produce, which keeps prices there more stable.
My reaction is yay to Canada for supporting their dairy farmers. I wish they would support us here in this country.
Well, I would like to see a quota system or a supply management program put in place, like in Canada.
So what it comes down to is this. These farmers and others we talk to do say there's plenty of blame to go around. But they also say to heap so much blame on Canada for American farmers not making money with their cows is bull.
Most people would know me as the fabulous farm babe.
Pam Yankee is a well-known and respected agriculture journalist.
What about dairy? Well, that is also suffering with red ink declines.
She says the problems for dairy farmers are not black and white, and that it would help for the president to be more nuanced.
The oversupply situation we've got in the United States was precipitated by really good, productive farmers, but it was confounded by closing that market off to Canada. So yes, some of the responsibility for our oversupply situation sits with that Canada relationship.
The Goodmans would like to retire, but the market for selling their cows is very poor. As for the Nelsons,
Do you feel that a time could come where you have to give up this business?
Well, I think the end of this year, if we can't see something in the future that looks better, and it looks, as bad as it looks right now, I would say the end of this year, we take a hard look at scaling back.
Wow.